I'm Caitlin Collins at the White House, and this is CNN.
Okay, so this is interesting. In New York City, Manhattan's new district attorney announcing that he won't prosecute some crimes as overall crime spikes in the city. In a memo, Alvin Bragg says that his office will not prosecute marijuana misdemeanors, skipping public transportation fares, trespassing, resisting arrest and prostitution. Bragg says that he wants to invest more in alternatives to incarceration that will reduce reoffending and conserve resources. Plus, the new policy is laid out in Bragg's memo. It says that unless you are being charged with a violent crime or public corruption, you won't wait in jail for a trial. You won't wait for a trial in jail. So joining me now, CNN legal analyst Joey Jackson and CNN political commentator Scott Jennings. All right, this is interesting. So I can't wait to have this conversation. Good evening, gents. Joey, you're first. Bragg says that this move will keep New Yorkers safe. It's going to free up resources for prosecutors to focus on violent crime. Will that happen if his office stops prosecuting lower-level crimes?
I think it certainly could. Good evening to you, Don and Scott. Listen, I'm an alumni of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, proudly prosecuted crimes in Manhattan. And certainly, I think the city and people in the city need and want to feel safe. But what I read his memo and his policies as are really diverting resources into violent criminal actions. When you have guns on the street, resources should really go there. When you have violent sex offenders, we need to address that. We need to address assaults. We need to address people who are abusing from a domestic violence context, from the context of sexual offenders. And I think what he's saying is that we really have to focus on that. There's such a long time where the city has, in fact, prosecuted these petty crimes. And I think what you want to do is really focus on the people who are violent criminals in the city of New York. This is a guy who, you know, look, he's been a federal prosecutor. He's a civil rights attorney. He was a prosecutor in a state level. And I think him, combined with the fact that we have a mayor who has served as a law enforcement official and retired as a captain, I think will be one of the safest cities in the United States of America.
I just want to be clear, like I mentioned, Joey, people accused of murder, sexual assault, domestic violence, or major economic crimes are still going to be prosecuted and will still have to wait for their trial in jail, right?
Right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the other issues. It's the lower level offenses. You have to ask the city of New York before Scott goes, I'm sorry, Scott, you have to ask them, listen, would you rather prosecute someone who's waving a gun or jumping over a turnstile? Would you rather them prosecute someone who's abusing, you know, a woman on the street or doing something else or engaged in, you know,
you can't do both?
And so I think you can, but I think that in a world where the resources are limited, you really have to focus those resources in an area where they're needed and necessary.
All right, so then I'm not going to pay to ride the subway anymore. I'm just going to jump the turnstile since I'm not going to be prosecuted. But anyways, I'm kidding. But I can understand some people saying, why should I pay to ride the subway or what have you if other people aren't going to be, no one's going to be prosecuted for it. So Scott, you know, Bragg campaigned on this policy. He won. Why shouldn't he be able to implement what New Yorkers supported? What do you think of this?
Well, I mean, he should be able to implement because he did win, and he's more than capable, I guess, of implementing the same sort of soft-on-crime policies that have been implemented in San Francisco, Chicago, Philadelphia, Baltimore, these places that are utopias of public safety. I mean, look, I don't live in New York. I love New York. I've been visiting it and have been in it quite often in my years with CNN. This makes me think twice about whether or not I want to be in the city, and certainly about whether I want to bring my family there. Joey, who I have a lot of respect for, by the way, and trust his legal opinion. I'm not a lawyer, but you know, he mentioned about, do we want to prosecute people waving guns? Well, one of the provisions of this is they're downgrading armed robberies if you don't hurt somebody. So you will have people waving guns who don't get prosecuted to the extent that I'm sure the person being robbed or the store owner being robbed would like to see them prosecuted. I think this is a big political issue, by the way, Don. I think this is a continuation of liberal Democrats' war on police. I think you're going to see Republicans use it. I think you're going to see conservatives talk about this. And I think you're going to see the mayor of New York City, who, by the way, I have a lot of respect for because he's already standing up to the shutdown mafia and to the teachers' unions. You're going to see him put in a position here. Will he stand up for the police that he previously served with? I think this is a real test for him and a chance for him to distinguish himself nationally.
Well, let's talk about that. You both mentioned, and I know you want to respond, Joey, Eric Adams, right? He is a former police officer, and he has actually vowed to fight crime, but he actually seems to be on board with these changes that Bragg wants. Right? Watch this.
At the precinct level, someone comes in for a petty theft. Right at the precinct level, you identify that they have a mental health issue. Instead of locking them up, let's defer prosecution. Let's have a local community-based organization that deals with mental health illnesses. Handle it right at the precinct. That's the coordination we need. There's no reason to put someone with a mental health illness in Rikers Island. That's a revolving door.
Listen, we have seen the rise of smash and grab crimes in large cities, San Francisco, right? Like San Francisco, Scott mentioned that. Do you expect Bragg and Adams to stay eye to eye on this kind of crime? Because if it goes up, certainly it's going to be used as a political cudgel by the right and by, quite frankly, New Yorkers who really want a safe city.
Yeah, Don, are you asking me?
Yes, yes, sir.
Well, what I see is I see a mayor who's committed to the reduction of crime. I see a mayor who understands the nature of crime, having worn a vest in this city for 22 years and has retired as a captain. I see a prosecutor who's looking not to prosecute petty offenses and keep people, mostly of color, in jail. I see a prosecutor who's looking to divert resources and make people feel safe. With respect to Scott's assertion with regard to waving of guns, that's not at all what his memo says. What they're talking about are dangerous instruments that don't relate to guns, and what he indicated is that he's going to be putting out a very tough on crime gun policy, a hate crime policy in addition to this. And so what I do believe is that this will be a safe city. It will remain a safe city, and it'll be safer than ever. But what you have to do is you have to look to alternatives to incarceration for petty offenses. Let's go after those people who are representing the real threats to fantastic tourists that we want in our city, like Scott and his family. Let's make sure that they feel safe, that we all as New Yorkers, that myself who goes to the city every day and everyone else is safe, but let's focus on those people who need to be incarcerated, and let's have diversion programs and not be putting them in jail. Let's put the rapists and other people who deserve to be in jail. I think this is a policy we have to let breathe. I think we have to look for alternatives, and I think this is a district attorney and a mayor who are committed to making the city the safest and the best place it can possibly be for years to come.
Scott, we want you to come. We want your family to come. And I promise you, I won't jump the turnstile. I'll actually give you my subway card so you can, so you can use it if you're here.
I have to say that some of this is actually, I think, a good social debate about nonviolent crimes. But I have to say, this whole issue of downgrading and not prosecuting people who are resisting arrest. If I were a police officer in New York City, that issue alone, I'm out here trying to keep the city safe, to do what Joey says, have a safe city, and you're basically giving people a blueprint or a pass on how to commit crimes and get away with it, and say resisting arrest is somehow going to be a lesser charge or not prosecuted at all. That would give me extreme concern if I were a public safety officer in any city doing that.
All right, that's the last word. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. The world's top tennis player being